seat, Mark. Just want to do a sound check for everybody. You have it? Okay. Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Subodh Chandra. I'm the managing partner of the Chandra Law Firm. With me, come a little closer, is Gary Brack, our client, who has filed suit today against Armin Budish, the county executive of Cuyahoga County, Akram Boutros, the CEO of MetroHealth, MetroHealth itself, Cuyahoga County, the former corrections director, Ken Mills, and Jane Platten, the chief of staff for MetroHealth. Also with me is my partner, Ashley K. Sletvold, who is working hard on this matter. We are all experiencing the trauma and tragedy of now up to 9 deaths in the Cuyahoga County jails. The most recent one this month. And all of this could have been avoided if the efforts of Nurse Gary Brack had been respected. Gary Brack, RN, has a distinguished career as a nurse going back 20 years. He has special certifications specifically in the area of correctional health. And he did everything he could to sound the alarm internally first at MetroHealth and within the county, within the sheriff's department, to ensure that inmates' health and lives were protected, and also to ensure the safety of his fellow medical professionals, including the nurse. This all came to a head on May 22nd, 2018, when Nurse Brack accompanied Jane Platten, the chief of staff for MetroHealth, to the Cuyahoga County Council meeting, and there Nurse Brack saw Ken Mills, the director of corrections, who had been so difficult and such an obstacle to healthcare and nursing in the facility. There Nurse Brack saw him dissemble and mislead and give not terribly truthful testimony to the council members. Now, Nurse Brack had been specifically instructed by Jane Platten on behalf of MetroHealth that he was not to speak other than on purely technical issues, that it was not a part of his job, that he was not supposed to say anything, in part apparently because of the fear that he would tell the truth. So he was specifically told that he was not to engage the council members. And yet the council members understood that he was the person with the medical knowledge on site that day on that May 22nd, 2018 hearing, who could answer what exactly was going wrong in the jails. And so they asked him. The chairman of County Council's committee, Michael Gallagher, and then also Councilwoman Yvonne Conwell, asked him pointed questions. And as professionally and diplomatically as he could, he told the truth. He talked about the conditions in the jails. And he was as restrained as he could be, but as a private citizen, engaged in private speech at that moment. Private speech is defined by MetroHealth, mind you, because they said that he wasn't doing this as part of his job. He told the truth. And so, as a result, and there's no dispute about this at this point because of the admissions in the media by the Budish administration, Armin Budish, the county executive, was incensed. And so what did he do? He went over to MetroHealth the next day, accompanied by an aide. and he demanded to Akram Boutros, the head of MetroHealth, that Gary Brack, this distinguished RN with the expertise in correctional health care, be removed from his position because he dared to criticize the government. There's just one problem with this. That violates the First Amendment to the United States Constitution, the right to free speech, the right to petition our government, these rights that we hold and cherish so dearly. And Akram Boutros, apparently willing to supplicate himself to the county executive because of this contract, complied. And that set in motion a chain of events in which Nurse Brack received a memorandum from the administration at Metro, removing him from his position and reiterating that his speech to county council was unacceptable and that he did it on his own and it wasn't a part of his job duties. The very admission that is required, for this to be a viable and strong First Amendment retaliation matter. He was speaking as a private citizen on a matter of public concern, albeit a public concern that he gained knowledge of as a public employee. It's a classic whistleblower situation. It is astonishing and breathtaking that we have public officials so high-ranking in this county, both at the hospital, and MetroHealth is a public hospital, and at the county, who simply displayed, in this instance, no respect for the United States Constitution and the First Amendment. None whatsoever. So, in the last year, Nurse Brack has been cooperating with law enforcement who have been investigating the conditions at the jails. We have, as you know, members of the media who have been contacting us have tried to respect that process. We have respected that process, and we have been silent through that period of time. But for reasons of legal necessity, we needed to preserve Mr. Brack's rights. He was eventually terminated from his employment, and we have filed suit. The complaint lays out in detail some of the new details that haven't been reported in the media about the conditions in the jails that Nurse Brack was concerned about, and he is going to give you a statement shortly and also answer your questions. Please don't hold it against him if from time to time I intervene and ask that we not answer a particular question at this time out of respect for both the law enforcement investigation and the civil legal process. But Nurse Brack has cooperated, he has testified, and he remains ready as a private citizen to assist law enforcement in getting to the bottom of what has been happening in our jails, which, as I said at the beginning, has ultimately resulted in 9 deaths. So, before I turn it over to Nurse Brack, I'd like to make one last point. I anticipate that one of the defenses that will be offered to the misconduct by both MetroHealth and by Cuyahoga County and Armand Budish, the county executive, is that somehow he had a contractual right, or the county had a contractual right, to dictate Nurse Brack's removal. We have seen that defense floated in the media by Mr. Budish's attorney. We have seen that sort of nonsense in writing from MetroHealth. That is emphatically untrue as a matter of law. It is simply not the case that a private contractual agreement, we should all be able to agree, can trump the United States Constitution or the First Amendment to the United States Constitution. So, to use an even more absurd example, slavery is illegal in America under the 13th Amendment to the Constitution. Two public entities could not privately contract and say, well, I had a right under this contract to engage in slavery. we would all agree that that's stupid to assert such a thing. And the same is true for the First Amendment, that there is no private contractual agreement that could possibly enable County Executive Armand Budish to retaliate against Mr. Brack for his speech that MetroHealth itself deems as speech that he uttered as a private citizen. But there's more. We have obtained, through public records requests, the contracts between MetroHealth and the county regarding the jails. And there are several contracts, but I'm going to pass out to you the relevant excerpts from, put out a few here, put out a few here. There you go. And if you look in these contracts, what you'll see on page 2 of the earliest contract we were given from 2014, or it's actually page 4, the second page of the excerpts. What it says is with, this is subsection 3C, with the advice of the medical director, CCSD, that's the corrections staffing, CCSD shall ensure that it employs or contracts with nursing staff sufficient in number and in quality as it determines in the sole discretion of CCSD that is necessary to effectively operate the center. Okay? But then, when you look at the contract amendment from the following, I think it was in March then, if you turn the pages, you will see language that says, this is on page 5 of the amendment, it says at C, other than its assistance in selecting the medical director as further described as below, CCSD, that's Cuyahoga County, will have no authority to select or remove any medical unit, administrative or clinical staff. CCSD will have no direction, control, or direct or indirect oversight over medical unit staff. MetroHealth will retain the sole authority to manage clinical operations and direct and control all medical unit staff. So the position of both MetroHealth and apparently Armand Budish, as expressed through his attorneys, that somehow he had the right to dictate Mr. Brack's, Nurse Brack's removal is false. It's contractually false, and it's false as a matter of basic constitutional law. And so I respectfully challenge all of the reporters who are here to not just simply buy and print that explanation if it's offered again, but to point out that even contractually this was incorrect. And so the only explanation we are left with is the contract is being used as a fig leaf or as pretext for unconstitutional acts. With all of that said, I thank all of you for coming, and I would like to give the opportunity for our distinguished client, Gary Brack, RN, to say a few words to you.
Good afternoon. My name is Gary Brack. I'm a registered nurse. I hold a master's of nursing degree and have over 20 years of experience in emergency and critical care nursing. In 2015, I was hired by MetroHealth as the supervisor of nurses at the Cuyahoga County Correction Center. I worked in partnership with the county employee director of nursing to oversee the care of the detainees as well as manage the nursing staff. During my tenure at the Correction Center, I personally witnessed many instances of detainees and health staff being placed in danger due to insufficient staffing, poor attitudes, procedural inadequacies, and leadership bias and indifference. Multiple meetings with the leadership were convened to inform them of my concerns, with little result or outward difference toward the evidence I presented. After several years of concerted effort to bring positive transformation to a dire and potentially lethal situation, I brought my concerns to the County Council in an open forum in response to council member questions. This action resulted in the leadership of the county and the correction center retaliating with demand that MetroHealth relieve me of my duties, with subsequent firing. I was fired for whistleblowing. At no time have I wanted to do anything other than make a bad situation at the correctional center better for all who work or are housed there. As a result of my desire to seek institutional change, transparency, and accountability, I have been personally attacked and harmed by those who wish to remain unaccountable for the poor conditions at the correction center and ultimately to the taxpayers of Cuyahoga County. The county spokeswoman, Mary Louise Madigan, issued a public statement admitting my removal was due to my reporting of misconduct. This past year, 5 county administrators have abruptly resigned, and 4 have additionally been criminally charged and indicted for actions while in office. The former jail director, Ken Mills, and warden of corrections, Eric Ivey, are counted among those indicted. My reputation and position have been adversely affected by the actions of those against whom this legal action has been filed. I remain optimistic that the investigation into the conditions at the corrections center will bring an end to the deplorable and inhumane state of affairs that has resulted in the death of at least 9 detainees since I was fired for retaliatory reasons. The truth will come out, and I have faith that justice will be served in this case and regarding the mismanagement of the corrections center. Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions?
Gary, how tough has it been for you to sit here over the last 12 months and see the conditions that you tried to make people aware of essentially cost potentially 9 inmates their lives?
I publicly stated when I was removed in May via a news interview that if these conditions that I spoke of did not change, that inmates would die. I said that in May. Within 100 days after that, 5 inmates died in the county jail. And I believe it's unnecessarily from not changing the current staffing modality and taking those situations seriously.
Gary, why don't you take a minute to explain a little bit about why you had made that assessment and what you thought were the existing conditions that were putting inmates at risk not only of their health but also potentially death.
The county was so understaffed that on a typical day, the census or the count was close to 2,200 inmates. On the night shift, I had 3 RNs in the entire facility, 3 RNs for 2,200 inmates. There's no way that you could possibly do intake procedures, interview inmates who were suicidal, administer medications, and respond to medical emergencies in a 2-story building with 2,200 inmates with 3 registered nurses. I stated then, and I still state, it's plain dangerous. And it remains dangerous because those staffing numbers have still not been reflected or adjusted to account for those for the number of inmates that they have.
And that's just for starters, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
You, I can understand your firing happening between Boutros and Budish. Why is Jane Platten and why also Ken Mills named in this lawsuit?
I'll answer that. So they are named because Platten participated in the firing. Platten was a part of that process. She was part of the communications apparatus to Gary, and she was a part of it. Right, and in addition, there's a separate claim for prior restraint under the First Amendment, and so she had imposed the prior restraint on behalf of MetroHealth, telling Mr. Brack that he couldn't warn the county council in the hearing, or anyone, about what was actually going on in the jails. In addition, Ken Mills was a participant in these events, and we believe that the evidence is going to show that he was responsible for in part responsible for spurring the retaliation against Mr. Brack by Mr. Budish and Mr. Boutros, Dr. Boutros.
You talk about it in the complaint. Ken Mills isn't necessarily top of this food chain isn't. You believe Ken Mills was acting on behalf of Armin Budish in a lot of cases.
Well, with respect, it depends on what we're talking about. With respect to these events and the firing, yes, we believe that Armin Budish, in fact, he's admitted through his spokesperson that based on what Nurse Brack said, that he wanted him terminated and went to Dr. Boutros and arranged for that. So that is, I don't think, going to be in dispute at this point unless they want to change their public story, realizing that they've admitted to unconstitutional conduct. Now, as for the jail conditions, I'll let Nurse Brack comment on that, but he may be able to elaborate on, from his own personal knowledge, what he knew Ken Mills's responsibility was versus what others were driving. Do you want to have anything to say about that?
Sure. In the 3 years I was the nursing supervisor at the jail, Euclid Jail was open that entire time. There was no medical staff assigned to the Euclid Jail. So the former director, Marcus Harris, or I would visit the Euclid Jail to check on the inmates. The county had a specific policy that inmates who were arrested in the municipalities were to be brought down to the county, the main downtown, to be seen by a registered nurse, seen by the doctor, have a 14-day physical, we called it, to be assessed. What Marcus and I discovered in going to Euclid is that Director Mills had given a directive to the security sergeants, supervisors, corporals, that he did not want the inmates sent down to county if they were only going to be in there 4 or 5 days. The problem with that is people who are arrested have medical problems. People have high blood pressure, people are diabetic, have cancer, have HIV, take medications, diabetics.
Mental illness.
Mental illness is huge. And so what we were finding is when we would go out there on multiple occasions, we would visit the Euclid Jail, we would find inmates in hypertensive crisis, their blood pressure was through the roof. We would find diabetics who hadn't had their insulin in 48 hours. We'd find inmates who were fearful of telling correction officers that they take HIV medications or that they have some type of health concern. They didn't feel comfortable sharing that with corrections personnel. Multiple times we found inmates in health crises. When we contacted Director Mills and emailed him, his response was, "I run the jail. Don't tell me what to do." Gave directives specifically in defiance of the county's policy, putting inmates in jeopardy multiple times. At the main jail, the jail was so overcrowded, they took on the City of Cleveland contract without hiring any additional staff. We couldn't handle the amount of population we already had, let alone an additional 25 to 50 to 75 new arrests every day. I didn't have the staff of nurses to even screen these inmates. Inmates would come in with medical problems, and the way we would find out that they were diabetic is when a medical emergency was called 2 days later because the inmate was hypoglycemic, unresponsive in their cell. And then through a process of kind of looking at how things were running, Mills was directing the staff, the security staff, to just put the inmates in general population without any kind of a health screening. That's not in compliance with the law. The law says they have to have a medical screening by medical personnel. Anytime we addressed it, we would copy the sheriff on it, the medical director, Dr. Tallman. Nothing was ever resolved because Mills constantly would say, "I run the jail. Don't tell me how to run the jail." So Marcus and I, we had no one to go to because they felt that they were above the law.
And you knew when you went to that meeting last May that you were going to be starting this avalanche. Why did you decide that it was so important that you had to say something now?
Yeah. As a nurse, I think it's critical to advocate for patient safety. In addition to that, my nursing staff was unsafe. All around, it's setting up litigious opportunities within the correction center. Inmates should be taken care of. My staff shouldn't have to fear not having enough security officers to go and do their jobs. It was a trickle-down effect, him cutting the security staff, him cutting the hours for our medical dispensary, cutting security officers to escort inmates. We'd have inmates that were suicidal that not only did I not have the staff to see them. I didn't have a registered nurse even available to do it, but there wasn't even security able to go and get the inmate to see the inmate. So there's no wonder why 9 people died, because the way that the county is set up, it's a disaster. And things will continue unless they change what they're doing down there.
Was
And
this
it's-
Mills, or
let me-
did this go all the way to the top? The complaint says Mills' orders came straight from the top. He faithfully executed Budish's mandate to cut costs at any cost.
Correct. I can't answer that. I know that Mills, Warden Ivy, Sheriff Pinckney, Chief George Taylor, all of them were CC'd and copied on all of our concerns. We would copy everybody to no avail.
And this went on for years?
Years.
Right.
15, 16, and 17.
Yeah, and I also want to clarify that as far as the May 22nd council hearing, if you look at that hearing and you look at the, we've transcribed that hearing as well, what Nurse Brack is doing is responding to questions from the council members themselves, because they are concerned about all of this.
And you felt at that time you had to answer.
Correct. The situation had gotten so bad. Marcus had resigned his position it was.
Explain to Marcus.
So Marcus Harris was the director of nursing for the county. Ken Mills had made it unbearable for him as a county employee, just daily kind of sabotaging the medical department. Marcus left, so that left me by myself as the only nursing personnel to manage the entire operations. It became so bad I had no staffing that not only was I doing my administrative duties as a manager, but then I was having to work in staffing with my staff to even cover basic shifts. There was nights when it would be myself and 2 other nurses, so I made the 3rd nurse, and I was in a director position working the floor as a nurse, actually taking the med carts out, going into the housing units, taking care of inmates, along with all of my other responsibilities. Staffing was critically low and had only gotten worse. Kind of what came to a head is that we had put in, when the Cleveland contract came about, we were responsible for more inmates. Ken Mills had purposely got those positions that we had approved by the sheriff. He called over to OBM and had those positions removed, and then played dumb about it and acted like he didn't know what happened to him. After the sheriff had signed off, we had copies from the sheriff signing off. Maggie Keenan, the director of OBM, the Office of Budget Management, nixed those positions per Ken Mills' request, so we never got additional RNs.
After everything that you went through this past year and you saw what happened, do you ever regret your actions or?
I don't. There's a lot of hardworking people at the jail, the officers, the nurses. I think everybody tries to do the best that they can. The leadership at the jail needs to change. The administration needs to change. They need to listen to what's going on. My biggest thing was advocating for the patients, which are inmates, and also for my staff, to make sure that my staff goes home safe and that the officers can do their job and take care of the inmates, because that's what we're tasked to do down there.
I want to make sure that we discuss one other topic which has come up in our discussions, which is the topic of the opioid epidemic and the impact on the jails, and Nurse Brack's efforts to try to ensure that there was proper addiction identification and treatment for people who were addicted to opioids or other dangerous substances, and the roadblocks that he ran against with the county in those efforts. Nurse Brack, could you please explain that?
As all of you probably know, the opioid crisis is horrific in Cuyahoga County. One of the things that we implemented in the jail was doing a withdrawal assessment on any inmate who either self-reported or the nurses, when they saw the nurse, if the nurse observed any symptoms of withdrawal. Typically, we do scoring or assessment on inmates. I didn't have enough staff to even do the assessments on the inmates every day, so we would have inmates come in active withdrawal with mental status changes because they're so into their withdrawal period that they wouldn't see a nurse, and then we didn't find out till a medical emergency was activated in the jail to find out that the inmate had been there for 2 days, 3 days, and had never seen anybody. And then part of the problem was, even after we identified that somebody was using some type of opioid substance, I didn't have the nursing staff to even go in the housing units to perform the assessments. If they were done once a day, that was a good day, because I didn't have enough staff to even reassess these inmates, every 2 to 4 hours. We didn't have enough staff to even administer medications to the inmates like we do in the hospital setting or long-term care setting. I didn't have the staff. We have, approximately one nurse was administering medications to 250 inmates. 250 inmates, and on average they would take 3 to 4 pills each. So they're lining up at the door. It's, you're in a correction center environment. The nurses have to monitor, get their vital signs, do an assessment. There's no privacy involved. We had talked about having a housing unit specifically just for inmates with opioid withdrawal. When we identified someone coming in who was coming down, we wanted to set aside a couple housing units where we'd have a nurse set in there 24 hours a day to kind of monitor those inmates. We had talked with Director Mills about that and Warden Ivy. That never came to fruition.
And why don't you say a little bit more about what their actual reaction was, what Mills would say to these efforts?
Yeah,
to try to
typically
treat
whenever,
addiction?
Marcus and I were, Marcus Harris, the Director of Nursing, and I, and Dr. Tallman, we were all certified in correctional health care. So we had gone to conferences, we had talked with other jails to kind of see what their processes was. What is best practice in the correction industry? What do other prisons or jail systems do? And so when we would bring these topics up at, meetings, Mills and Ivy would laugh, would snicker at us, and again, it always came to, we run security, stay in your lane was his famous line to me. He would always say, stay in your lane, you're not going to tell me what to do. So nothing that we ever kind of came up with that would have benefited the jail ever came about because, and part of that is too, there was no officers to even bring inmates down. So we would have inmates who, Judge Matthias had started a big program with the naltrexone injections. So we tried to get inmates screened for that. We couldn't even get the inmates brought down to medical because we had to run sick call, we had a dental sick call, we had psychiatry sick call. That was kind of the least of their priorities. So if we would have even had someone to bring the inmates down, they could have maybe been seen. In a population of 2,200, we had a part-time, I think he came 2 days a week, drug counselor. 2 days a week for 2,200 inmates. And then on some of the days he came, he couldn't even see the inmates because there'd be no officer to transport the inmates. So sometimes he would come and we'd have a list of 20 inmates who wanted to get some drug counseling, and he wouldn't even be able to see the inmates because there was no officers to transport the inmates. We would call the corporals, we would call the sergeants, I'd call the warden. And the answer was, well, where am I supposed to pull these officers out of? So there was no resolve to anything that ever happened down there. So, and there was no accountability. There was no repercussions for them not bringing inmates down for medical. I used to respond to all the grievances in the jail. Anytime an inmate was upset with something, they would write a grievance, and then I was solely responsible to investigate that, to follow up, to take some kind of action on
Is
it.
this only as to medical issues?
Only medical or mental health. That kind of fell under medical issues. So many times inmates would write, I can't even get scheduled to see the doctor. They couldn't see the physicians because we had no staff to even bring them down. They were constantly red zone, which is when there's one officer for 2 and 3 and 4 housing units. This went on for years, and there's still red zoning. There's still, the county keeps saying, oh, we're going to hire more, we're going to hire more, but it doesn't take care of the problem. So you still have inmates that don't get to see medical. The current administration, as of a couple weeks ago, MetroHealth staff at the jail called me. They didn't even know how to pull up the annual physical list, the physicals for the inmates. We're required to do a 14-day health assessment on any inmate that comes in. Within 14 days, they have to have a full health assessment. The IT person from MetroHealth contacted me because she did not know how to pull up a 14-day physical list. So I know that those inmates, if you were to go look right now, I know that they're still behind in their health assessments. If you don't even know how to pull a list, I know you haven't seen the inmates because I was the one that used to pull the list as the director down there. So if you don't know how to pull those lists, who's pulling it?
Did you feel like on May 22nd, for the first time in years, somebody from the county government was listening to your concerns?
I did. I have to say I was shocked when I was relieved from my position. I felt like when I went to county council that there would effectively be some change. I felt that somebody would kind of take some action. I felt that county council had some clout and that Budish would listen and kind of, reach out to me, maybe contact me. And I've never had one conversation with Budish or Dr. Boutros from MetroHealth, despite me reporting all these safety concerns that were potential for patients, for inmates to die, potential for staff to get injured. Never once did Dr. Boutros or Armin Budish pick up the phone and say, hey, Nurse Brack, what's going on down there? What did happen was 2 days later, I'm summoned to MetroHealth and told you're relieved of your position because you're telling too much. You almost violated our contract, jeopardized our contract.
There was a point where you actually said, this is my personal opinion, and you went on to talk about the way Ken Mills treated or dealt with the sheriff at the time. Was that really part of your job to discuss things like that?
You know, my personal opinion is just that. It's my personal opinion. That was from my firsthand experience working with Mills directly. And I felt that county council is a governing body, and I feel that, you know, they asked me direct questions. They asked me what the situation was. Mm-hmm. I was going to be as truthful and recall as many events as I could, despite Jane Platten telling me right before the meeting to be diplomatically correct. And as I'm standing up there talking, just how Mr. Chandra is standing next to me, she's scrolling on a piece of paper, stop. She's writing stop, you can see in the video. She's writing the word stop as I'm telling about the truthfulness of what's going on at the county. They were so concerned about that money, losing that contract, that they didn't care about patient safety or my staff's safety. That's what it comes down to. It's all about money. It's not about taking care of inmates. It's not about taking care of making sure that the correction staff, that the medical staff go home safe. It's about the bottom line, and they wanted to make that money.
Okay. Well, I want to thank everybody for coming. As you see, you can see that we've been very restrained in having this information out because we've been trying to defer to the law enforcement investigation. But it's time for the truth to start coming out here more and more in a public way and through the litigation process as well. I think it's very telling, those last comments by Nurse Brack, that with all of this animus and hatred that was directed at him for telling the truth and the retaliation he faced, not once did he hear any expression of concern from County Executive Budish or from Dr. Boutros, the CEO of MetroHealth, about what he actually knew, what he had actually seen, what the jail conditions might be, whether inmates' lives were at risk, whether nursing staff and other medical professionals might have safety issues. That was not the concern. The concern was we have to make ourselves look good and we have to preserve this contract. So it's unfortunate. That's not how public service is supposed to work. But as Americans, we all have a First Amendment right to speak out when we have this kind of knowledge on a matter of public concern. It is our right. We have a right to be free of retaliation, both as a matter of First Amendment law, but also if you look at the complaint, it's actually alleged in the complaint that those are criminal acts for which individuals can be civilly liable. They are criminal acts under the Ohio Revised Code to retaliate against a public servant in the discharge of their duties, to interfere, for public servants to interfere with someone's civil rights, their constitutional rights, their statutory rights. And that's what we see happen here. So I think what remains to be seen now is whether the county and MetroHealth will slowly come to terms with the trouble that they're in and want to resolve this. That's what real public servants would do. Real public servants would look at this complaint, realize that it's true, and say, we need to resolve this expeditiously. Instead, what I anticipate is they will farm this to very expensive outside counsel, and we will see somebody else making money off of these misfortunes, and a lot. And that's just unfortunate that the taxpayers are going to pay for that, but it looks like the situation we have with the decision makers at issue. So all media should feel free to be in touch with us as things move along. We're going to be pretty circumspect, but over the coming days and weeks, we actually may make Nurse Brack available, because I want to be clear about what our mission is in doing this. As you know, those of you who've dealt with our firm, is once the matter's in litigation, we don't usually have a lot to say beyond explaining the initial filing. But one of the reasons that we think it's important here, and Nurse Brack thinks it's important, is that lives are at risk. I mean, 9 people are dead already, the 9th being just this month. And we just don't want to see the body count rise. And we don't want to see people's health suffering. And since we don't have an indication yet that our public servants actually care about that and prioritize that, other than the lip service they've been giving you all, we're going to continue to make Nurse Brack available to speak out about what he observed to law enforcement, to government investigators, if there are other agencies that are interested in the civil process, and to media, because that's the only way we are going to force change and save lives.
Do you believe there are other county employees right now who want to speak out but are scared of becoming the next Gary Brack?
Absolutely. In fact, we know that to be the case because Nurse Brack has received encouragement from many of the people that he worked with, and they are terrified. They are scared. Because that's what First Amendment retaliation does. That's what retaliation does. It sends a chilling effect across all the other public servants who want to speak out and who want to be heard. And that's what County Executive Budish, who I've known for a long time. I mean, I know at some point he started off as a well-intended public servant. But that's what he needs to wake up and realize. He needs to wake up and realize that he is so insulated and so isolated and in such a bunker mentality, trying to make himself look good and avoid bad publicity and avoid any criticism, that he's lost sight of what the real public service is all about, which is go down to the people who are at the front lines, learn what they know, and help them be public servants and fix the problems. And these are serious problems. These are life and death problems. So I hope they'll wake up and realize this, but I don't have any indication they will from the kind of foolish comments they've been making in the media. I mean, just stupid comments. We had a right to do it contractually. We did it. I mean, no, not even any comprehension of the legal ramifications of the admissions that they're making publicly. It shows a level of cluelessness that is really unfortunate. So from Nurse Brack's standpoint, it was just time to come forward, start laying this all out, and hope that the collective media attention and pressure forces change. Maybe that change will be driven by county council. I don't know. That remains to be seen. Maybe the county executive will, engage people who will do it. We don't know. But it's got to happen, or there are going to be more bodies. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming.
Mr. Brack, have you been working since being fired?
I have, yeah.
Are you working full-time?
Part-time.
Yeah, he's not covered. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thanks. Step out.